The real hard work began, and the editing process began at that point. So.
And that's a credit. It's a credit to just the stick-to-itiveness there. How many times I have started something and just never got finished. And this starting out, it was going to be just like a real short thing, and then it's got to be bigger than that. And how many years started? You said 2007 is when you started this?
It took approximately 3 years to get the whole. I hadn't sat down and calculated the actual days and months, but time frame of around 3 years just to get out of my brain and into the computer.
And what was really fun about it is that once the kids knew about this thing, you actually invited them to be contributors to this. Tell us some of the contributions your kids did.
Well, as I was reading different chapters, sometimes I'd have something written, and I was like, this section I'm not really sure if I like the way that sounds. And they'd give me input, and like, yeah, you need to give more detail there, Dad. We want to know what's happening behind the scenes there in that particular scene. So I was like, that's good input. So I'd, sit down, and I want to add, too, that, there's a lot of prayer that went into this book, because there were times where I had a rough outline of a chapter. For example, there's a chapter in there called "And the Blind Will See," and the wise men have changed hands several times. It's years later from the beginning of the book, and they've been given as a gift to a wounded soldier. It's in the hospital. He's got bandages over his eyes. He's missing an arm, and he's lost a couple of friends. That comes out in the story, and he doesn't have any real family to speak of. And he's sitting there in his hospital bed Christmas Eve, and he's feeling pretty down, pretty depressed. So the wise men characters, they're ceramic, but they come to life each Christmas Eve, and they come to life and start a conversation with this young man who's feeling down and in a bad situation. And he doesn't realize he's talking to little 6-inch tall people. He thinks it's just some volunteers that have stopped by to talk to him. Mm-hmm. And so I really struggled with writing that. I knew I wanted to write something that would, touch people's hearts, and not only, people in that type of a situation, but any type of a difficult situation that somebody's going through. And I many times when I was writing that chapter, I said, God, what do you want me to say in this chapter? How do you want me to write this? How do I write what I'm trying to, capture in this chapter? Because originally I had this idea that I would, have this wonderful dialogue that I would capture in the chapter and that I would write. And as I prayed about it, God just kind of spoke to my heart. It's like, I don't have all the answers. And maybe it would be wise in writing this chapter to break away from the dialogue, leave some of those gaps purposefully, and catch glimpses of their conversation throughout the night, so that a reader in a variety of situations might be dealing with a difficult time will catch those glimpses of that conversation, realize there's something deep and something powerful happening between these characters, but because there's flashing back and forth, they can fill in kind of some of those tidbits with their own experience. And that's, that took several weeks for me to work through that writer's block, and that's kind of where I felt God led me to. So anyway, in that chapter, because it's a fairly heavy chapter. It's a children's book, so there's nothing real heavy in the book. It's always peppered with humor. So I had the camel character. He goes on a little adventure of his own in the hospital while the three wise men are having this deep conversation. So you flash back and forth from this really intense conversation about this young man and his struggles, both physically with his injuries and spiritually. And, instead of going into great detail, then you flash over to the camel. What's he doing? He gets on this little adventure, which is fun, and I'm not going to give you any spoilers. You'll have to read the book, but there's actually a surprise ending where it comes back to that point in the book, in the epilogue, I might add. But anyway, so you flash back and forth between this kind of heavy scene to this fun adventure that the camel goes on and some of the mischief that he gets into. And so anyway, I just share that because, there's a lot of thought that went into it, a lot of creativity, as you said. But I really prayerfully approached this book and worked through some of the chapters and asked for God's inspiration as I was writing.